Welcome to Play in School TV. I'm Rich Prado. In today's episode, I'm going to tell you the biggest difference between playing D1 and D3. Guys, so I just came back from a midweek game over at the local college, and I got thinking, this is a conversation that comes up a lot about the differences between the D3 experience versus the D1 experience. And depending on who you talk to, you're going to hear a variety of answers about what are the biggest differences. Some of the things that come up as far as the biggest differences at the D1 versus D3 level oftentimes are the physical, right? You talk about the guy who throws a little harder at the D1 level. You talk about the guy who's maybe a couple steps quicker at the D1 level versus the D3 level. I get that. That's a fair argument. But that's not what I think is the biggest difference. Then you get a group of people who think that the D3 experience is maybe just maybe a tick above the high school experience. I wholeheartedly disagree. It is very different. Then you get the camp who thinks that D3 baseball players aren't competitive. No, I'm going to tell you that's not true either. Then there's the folks who tell you the D3 facilities aren't that great. If you come on one of the bus tours this summer, I'll show you firsthand how great the D3 facilities are. Then you get the folks under the very false misconception that D3s aren't good schools. Couldn't be further from the truth. As a matter of fact, some of the most elite academic institutions in the country are actually D3 schools. Okay, so you're saying, get on with it. Tell me, what do you think? In my opinion, the thing that really separates the D1 experience from the D3 experience comes in the schedule. But it's not just that the D1 programs play more games, okay? That's true. But where the real difference comes and what really separates the D3 from the D1 comes in time away from the classroom. So what prompted me to talk about this today is it's a Tuesday, a random Tuesday in April. I'm over at the local college, and a school from an hour down the road is up here playing. So you think that's not a big deal until you realize that the visiting team has a 1 o'clock BP. It's an hour drive. They're going to get here about noon so they can get their lunch digested and get their turfs on and be prepared for BP. That means they have to leave their campus at 11 a.m. Now remember, this is a random Tuesday in April. They have left campus at 11. If they're leaving campus at 11, that means most of these ball players are going to be prepping themselves to head to the bus by 10 a.m. at the latest. So we're going to continue backing up the clock. That means at the very best, these kids had an opportunity to get to their 8 a.m. class and maybe their 9 a.m. class. And again, this is a random Tuesday in April. To me, the time away from the class is what really separates that D1 experience from that D3 experience. Now, if you continue to break down the schedules, what you're going to see is many times that D1 player has to get on a bus in the middle of the week for road games, which means classes missed on the day of the game. Now, if it's a pretty far trip, you may not be getting back until midnight or maybe a little earlier, maybe a little later. Okay, so if you've been on a bus until midnight and you've got an 8 a.m. game, that's a tough assignment to get to that 8 a.m. Class, I should say. To get to that 8 a.m. class the morning after a long road trip. So that's midweek. Let's talk about the weekend series. The weekend series, you'd say, well, that's on the weekend. You don't miss any class. There's no class on the weekend. But this is where you're wrong. In recent years, it has become quite popular for road teams to hit the road on Thursday That allows the road team to get a practice on the field of the school they're going to be playing at on Thursday before the series begins on Friday. Okay, so you know you're missing all day of class on Friday. Now, depending on how far that road series is, you might be missing class on Thursday, depending on what time you're leaving and depending on what time your classes are. Imagine that you have a road trip on a Tuesday, followed up by a road trip that's a pretty good distance away, then you're leaving on Thursday. That means you might miss a bunch of class on Tuesday, some class on Thursday, and all day of class on Friday. Guys, that is the biggest difference. That is the enough to crush a kid in the classroom. Now, I'm speaking from experience. That crushed me. To come full circle and look at some of those things that a lot of people think are the biggest differences. Guys, honestly, I've seen 91 at the D3 level, okay? And even if the starter's an 86 to 87, that's not that different than 90 to 92. It's just a few miles per hour, okay? Your 6'7" runner at the D1 level is not that big a difference than that 6'9" runner at the D3 level, okay? The D3 player, believe me, that he is just as competitive, works just as hard, and wants to win just as bad as a D1 guy, okay? But when his schedule allows him to stay in the classroom much more often because of fewer games during the week, and a typical weekend series is just a Saturday doubleheader in conference, very few Friday games. That means that D3 player is not missing time in the classroom. Okay? So guys, the reality is that if you're watching this and you're a ball player, or if you're watching this and your kid's a ball player, that his career, your career, is getting close to the end. Okay? Very few guys over here are going to get paid to play this game for any length of time, which means that classroom experience and being in class, which leads to getting decent enough grades to graduate, will set you up to get a job in the real world where you're going to join us and your parents in the real world. That is the key. Okay, so guys, look at those schedules. I want you to, every time you see a 3-game set for a D1 program and they play on a Friday afternoon, just remember that team probably traveled on Thursday. Okay, when you see that road game on a Tuesday, just remember they probably got to no classes on that Tuesday. So that, to me, is the biggest difference. Not the speed of the runner, not the velocity of the pitcher, not the competitiveness of the player. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Remember, follow me over on Twitter or any of the social media at PlayInSchool.